Linn Knight, one of the most incredible parent coaches that I know. I'm obsessed with you and follow you all the time on social media. And we met when you were a client of mine with your firstborn. And since then, you've really grown your practice to be a parent coach. And your mission is really about like, how do we create calmer homes and calmer relationships with our children when we feel those places of overwhelm? And I don't think there's one parent on the planet who's never felt like that edge of overwhelm where you really do feel like you're going to like lose it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just spend a little time hearing from you about, where did this all start for you? What's important about it for you? If you've got any words of wisdom and tips for us parents, as we navigate not just how to move through the day as with our babies, but with multiple children.
Yes.
An older sibling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And because we need practical tools as parents. I don't always have time to read, a 400-page parenting book in the moment. So that's why I am here today, because I would just love to share when we talk about self-care, one of the first things that comes to my mind is actually our own self-regulation. And how do we as parents stay regulated so that we don't feel like we need to yell at our children and we don't need to threaten them and we don't feel like we need to bribe them? That's something that I do a lot of work with parents too. They're like, oh, I didn't think about the bribing thing either, because long term, we want our children to internally make these choices instead of having an external rule or bribe put on them, because we know that the studies show and the science shows that children who are just kind of being led in an authoritarian parenting model like that will oftentimes rebel. And so my goal is to help parents, find this kind yet firm balance. That's authoritative parenting.
Exactly. And when in my work with families who are working with sleep for their toddlers or older children, it's like I have to remind them the boundary actually has them feel safe.
It does.
They feel taken care of, safe. It's although they may resist it initially,
yes,
ultimately it's like, okay, I can relax now knowing there's a container, which we forget as parents, right?
We do. And we think about kids in school, in school, we have structure, we have containers, we have the rules. And it's not that we have to have that rigidity in our home, but children do want to know that there are boundaries and there are limits. And ultimately, they want to just really feel loved and seen and heard, which we all feel, that's how you and I feel too. And they will act out in ways to try and attain that. So often the behavior is just, or the misbehavior, there's a deeper need underneath that. And so that's why those boundaries are so important, because if we just let them continue with them, then they're not really getting the support at the end of the day that they need.
Right. So good. So Laura, would you be willing to talk a little bit about give like some tools or a practice for parents around, managing this kind of sense of overwhelm that all of us experience, whether it's we have one baby and we're just like spending the whole day, chasing naps and exhausted, or we have two where we've got an older one that needs attention and tending, and then we've got a little one. What are some top tools or skills or practices that you can offer that would be helpful for parents?
Yeah, I would love to offer those tools. And in my parenting opinion, I think that self-regulation is the keystone I would say self-regulation and effective communication, but let's talk about self-regulation right now, are kind of the keystones to all healthy family relationships. If I cannot be in a regulated state, if I am lashing out at my family, then no tools are going to serve me. So I think we can agree on that, and then say that, as a working definition, I would say self-regulation is the ability to calm yourself down and not react to your child with a yell, a threat, or a bribe to get them to act the way you think that you need them to act in that moment. And that's true even for mamas with little babies, even the mamas that just have one. It's like, just to normalize the fact that you are so exhausted and your hormones are so out of whack. And there are times when you just want to yell at your baby to stop crying. And so what tools can we use when we get to that place? Or you're trying to get your little one to nap. And I just remember the older one making noise, and it's like, oh, I finally got the baby to nap, and now you're going to make noise, and now I just want to scream. Right. So what do we do? What are the tools? And that I can share with you are, let's understand what's going on in your brain, because I think it empowers us when we understand. Let's have a plan moving forward, and just some tools that I offer for free, which are calming cards. So here's a picture of the brain, and we are not going to get into like a whole bunch of science on the brain, but what I do want to say is that this lower part of the brain is the reptilian brain. It's where our amygdala is. We are often hear the amygdala associated with fight, flight, freeze, that like response that we have. And in children, they are often down in this part of their brain, because up here is the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is associated with effective communication, being able to integrate, being able to process things, being able to calm the body down, but that won't develop for children until about the age of 25 years old. So we're kind of acting like their prefrontal cortex for a lot of their lives. So when I'm in a place where I'm like, I just want to pull my hair out and I want to scream and I don't know what to do, or I want to just run away to, that's that other response of like, just get me out of here, or I'm going to go in the room and shut the door. It really helps me to remember, hey, I'm in this lower part of my brain. This is activated now. This part of the brain is often called the lizard brain. If you think of a lizard in a terrarium and you're approaching it with a stick, the lizard's going to back up, it's going to open its mouth, it's going to get ready to protect itself. That's how we feel when we're in that part of our brain. And that's how our toddler feels when they're having a meltdown. They're in that same response. They're not able to be up here. So we want to help everyone to get there. And that's where the next tool comes in. Like, okay, let me recognize in this first step awareness of what's actually going on, because then I can kind of distance myself from the problem, right? Like, oh, I'm aware I'm in this part of my brain. It's nothing personal. I just happen to be in this part of my brain. My child might be in that part of their brain too. Let's take a step back from that and let's have a plan. So I've created a plan to pause poster. You can download it for free on my website. You can make your own. If you want it from my website, it's Laura Linn Knight with an I. I think my parents are the only people that wrote Lynn with an I. So lauralinknight.com. And I have a plan to pause poster for us adults and for our children. And so you're not going to do this with your baby, of course, but with your 2, 3, 4-year-old and up, you can sit down and say, hey, sometimes we get really frustrated and we feel really angry. What can we do when we're feeling really angry? I notice that for me, when I go in the other room and I take a deep breath, that makes my body feel better. Or I turn on my favorite song. I can go on a walk around my house or in my backyard. I can smell a flower, a piece of fruit, or an essential oil. And then I also always put things on my own plan to pause poster that I can also do with my children, because not only is this something that I'm going to use, but I want to model for them. So you can see number 5 is play the game rock, paper, scissors with my child. You probably remember that.
Totally.
Right? Rock,
Yeah.
paper, scissors, go. Rochambeau, go. And if you don't remember, Google it. There's just, you can get a little tutorial on it. But I had that this morning. My daughter woke me up and I was not happy to be woken up. And she immediately started this argument with her brother. And then I had to separate them. And then she came back into the room and she's like, "You're being so mean." And like my eyes were barely open. And I just said, "Do you want to come here for a minute?" And she sat down on the bed and I didn't even say anything. I just started right playing. And all of a sudden, she's not in this part of her brain anymore, because now she needs to use her critical thinking skills, right? She's thinking, am I going to do a rock? Am I going to do paper? Am I going to do scissors? So we've moved everyone from this lower part of our brain into the upper part of our brain by such a simple little somatic tool. I'm using my body, I'm using my hands, right. And then we can loop back. I noticed you were really angry this morning. What was going on? And we can have a conversation and we can problem solve. So these tools are simple, but they're so powerful. Another one, number 6 on this is really my plan to pause poster. So my 6th one is lay on the floor and put a stuffed animal on my belly. So what's really happening in that moment is we're going from our parasympathetic nervous system to our sympathetic nervous system. It's like if we are driving a car and we're going fast with the gas, our breath will actually help put on the brakes. So our breath is proven to scientifically calm our body down. Now, telling your child, go take a deep breath, feels like a punishment. Laying down on the ground and saying, hey, let's put a stuffy on our belly and watch them go up and down or give them a ride is a fun activity. And all of a sudden, we're not in the lower part of our brain, we're back in our prefrontal cortex. And now I can loop in and talk about the behavior.
Oh God, I wish I had known about these when I had littles.
Yes, they're really helpful. Now, the caveat is that if your child is so much in this lower part of their brain and they are so upset and angry, this is not the time that it's going to work. This is kind of like the catch before. But if they're just can't even control their body, we need to pause. We need to keep them safe. Then we can come back and do one of these activities and problem solve. So this is kind of a catch before or a catch after. Full on tantrum, harder to do. Some kids will. It just depends on the temperament of your child. But if it doesn't take the first time, don't despair. Keep doing this. I've been doing these plan to pause posters with my children since they were about 3 years old. And like I said, my son is 8 and my daughter's 6. And they update their posters as they get older and as they gain new tools.
Yeah, this could be like an activity every year to update.
Yes,
as they get older. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can I pause you here to ask
okay.
one question?
Yeah.
So here's a scenario: a new parent with a 3-week-old, 3-month-old, let's say. Okay. And they're not napping, and as you and I both know, that's like a form of torture. And so give me, what would be something a parent can do when they've got their little one in their arms?
Yes.
So no rock, paper,
have your little one in your arms and they're not napping and you just want them to nap more than anything. And you feel like you're just absolutely going to scream. That is the time when you yourself can take your deep breaths. You can just walk out of the room for a moment with your child. If you're holding them, turn on the sink, let a little bit of cold water run over your hands. You can have maybe something, if you like to smell, have fresh flowers in your room or, nearby the nursery, and just know, okay, I can go over and just take a smell. I'm refocusing my awareness. Something else, I don't know if we talked about this, but I am a mindfulness and meditation teacher too. So a lot of the tools that I try and incorporate are these tools of like, how do I get back to where my feet are? How am I talking positively to myself? Mindful self-compassion comes to mind. Can I put my hand on my heart and just say, wow, this is really hard. And I'm proud of myself that I'm trying my best. And I know it won't be this way forever. What narrative am I having in my brain? And so a lot of that will come as you sit down to make your poster of like, what are things that really soothe me? Those were my ideas of things that I find soothing, but your poster might look very different. And I encourage you to hang it up in the nursery and just go over and be like, oh, this is my plan. I've committed to this plan. Let me try it every day for a month and see if making this new habit works.
Yeah. Great. Wonderful. So tell me about these calming cards.
So the calming cards are similar to the plan to pause poster, but I actually made them for you. And so I have ones for kids and I have ones for adults. And the ones for adults, if you have a teenager, sometimes you might have a teenager and then later on in life have your baby too, right? And you're kind of relearning like, oh, how did I even do this sleep thing? And so it's great to use the adult ones you can use with the teenagers. But they're simple tools. I have a downloadable version for the phone, because what I do is I save them in an album on my phone. And then when I notice, okay, my 2-year-old, my 3-year-old is about to have a meltdown, I say, hey, do you want to pick a card? And so I'll just take the album out. I have it saved in an album on my phone. And they're tools like, they'll say, I'll trace your hands and you trace mine. So it's so simple, but again, it's a somatic tool. I'm out of my head and I'm into the body now, right? I was working with a boy who had really, really intense anxiety and just to the point where he couldn't participate in after school activities. And I just asked him one day, said, do you want to try tracing your hands? And he came back to me a week later and he was beaming and he's like, I've been tracing my hands. And he was so proud of himself. And it was just a simple, empowering tool. Another tool that I have on there is let's go to the sink and get the soap and blow bubbles, right? So now I'm using my breath to blow a bubble. Or I have the clapping games. Remember when we were little? Do you remember these, Sarah?
Totally.
So my daughter and I and my son and I love doing those. It's like, okay, let's get out of that part of our brain. Let's have some fun. And then for the parents, it's more of the tools that we just talked about. And sometimes in the moment, you're like, I don't know where my plan to pause poster is. I don't even like any of those ideas anymore. Maybe you need something fresh. And so these are, again, free and you can download them.
So great.
I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you bigger and then we can keep.
Yeah. What I appreciate is that these are concrete tools that are simple. They can be done right away. It doesn't take a lot of prep or a lot of like, logistics to take care of it. And I think it's that exact model that's so needed in a world that feels like it can feel kind of overwhelming a lot of the time. I remember thinking what really helped me was that narrative piece of just like, this is temporary. This moment is temporary. It's going to pass. This feeling will pass. This experience I'm having will pass. Because I think what happens is we get stuck in feeling like it's never going to end, which then cycles us into even darker thoughts and feelings. So yeah, really having a clear narrative for me was helpful also.
Absolutely. And
I
that's
didn't
where
realize,
you
like,
helped me so
I,
much.
oh,
Because I would get stuck in that cycle of like, my child is literally never going to sleep. Like, is this baby ever going to sleep? I don't know what I'm going to do.
I
And
know.
that was where I needed you to come in and have that reassuring voice of like, your child will sleep, and here are the practical tools, and here's how we're going to get there. And this is what we're going to do each day, because that's how my mind works. Like, what is my plan going to be to get from point A to point B? And then also what you're saying, giving the grace to myself and my child of like, oh, this won't last forever.
Totally.
Unfortunately, sometimes I wish I could go back to it too, because as hard as it was, it's so sweet.
I know. I never liked it when people said like, oh, it's just so wonderful. Enjoy it. I was just like, are you kidding me? I haven't showered in 5 days. There's nothing about this I'm enjoying right now, but I know exactly what you mean.
Yes.
Well, I think, I remember I was talking when my daughter was like something like 4 months old. I was talking with this Buddhist meditation teacher, and he said, I'll never forget, he said, so you can either you can read a lot of books or go on retreats to learn about anger and compassion and joy and helplessness and sorrow. You can do a lot of like meditation retreats to learn about these things. And he said, or you could just have a baby and then you learn them all. And I thought, you know what? It's true. It's like having a baby or having a child, a baby who grows up to be a child, is the teacher. The teacher for self-compassion. It's a teacher for breath. It's a teacher for remembering what helplessness is, and then we can move through helplessness. It's the teacher about understanding how our brains work and how to shift out of those places. It's just the advanced master's course and all these things. Right?
It really is. And it's the teacher, too, for looking at our own childhoods and our own things that push our buttons. That's another free activity I have on my website, is learning new patterns of behavior. When my children got older, I noticed that when I felt the most angry and upset was when I felt not heard by them. And children are not necessarily always supposed to listen to you. But as a child, I often felt unheard, right? So with my kids, it was like, oh, this is coming up. And now I have an opportunity to see it and to create a new behavior around this and a new pattern. But my eyes have to be open to that. Otherwise, it's so easy to think like, oh, it's the kids. The kids are doing this. But so often it's like, what's my lesson? What's my teaching? So that's very wise what was told to you by that teacher.
I call those ghosts in the nursery. I feel like there's a lot of material for us as parents to look at and explore, and our kids will just highlight it.
Yep.
So it is, there's a lot of opportunity there for us to learn if we choose to face it and really explore it. Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Wow. Well, I took a deep breath at one point when you were talking, because it's like, okay, yes, I feel myself even settling in as you're talking about these tools. And so the reminder of moving out of that part of the brain into the thinking part of the brain is so helpful for all of us to remember. And the ways that we can do that is like getting back into our bodies, and finding ways to get back into our breath. So wonderful. So wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, I so appreciate this. It's going to be so helpful for so many parents listening. And I just want to give you a shout out and a reminder that for the parents listening who have a couple kids or more, or toddlers or older children or babies, Laura is a wealth of information for this, and her website is just incredible to look for resources. She's writing a couple of books that are going to come out, and that's going to be a really fantastic resource for everybody. So check out her website, and I'll make sure I put that in the piece of information that I'm passing on to you. But it's Laura Linn, Linn, Knight, Knight. So thank you so much, so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and just thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen. And you're doing like such a good job for your little ones by like absorbing this information and connecting with Sarah and just being on this path. And congratulations, you know, this is an adventure and we're here to support you through it.